They promised glory, swift victory, a grand campaign of movement. Instead, soldiers found themselves buried in mud, wire, and death. Trenches weren't part of the plan. They were a last resort, an act of desperation. So how did a war, meant to end in weeks, freeze for years? This is the story of how modern firepower, blind optimism, and sheer human exhaustion turned World War I into a brutal deadlock. In the summer of 1914, Europe was on the brink, but no one expected what was coming. Germany had the Schlieffen plan, a lightning strike through Belgium, flanking the French army and seizing Paris in weeks. It was bold, it was fast, and it relied on everything going right. France had Plan Sexavine. It was romantic, suicidal, and full of national pride. The French would charge into Alsace-Lorraine, reclaim lost territory, and break German morale. Both sides believed in speed, spirit, and offensive momentum. They thought morale could outmatch bullets. Cavalry was still considered useful. Bayonets were polished. Bugles were ready. Nobody expected machine guns, barbed wire, or industrial slaughter. August 22, 1914. The bloodiest day in French military history. Over 27,000 men died in 24 hours. Clad in bright blue and red, the French infantry marched straight into German fire. Battles like Mons, Charleroi, and the frontiers exposed a terrifying truth. This wasn't the 19th century anymore. Warfare had changed, but generals hadn't. Every maneuver was answered with machine gun fire. Every charge led to carnage, and soldiers began to realize courage wasn't enough. As the front line stalled, both sides kept trying to outflank each other, stretching the fighting northward until they hit the sea. That's when they started digging. Trench warfare didn't begin with a blueprint. It began with panic. Soldiers dug into the earth for protection. First shallow scrapes, then deep fortifications. By October 1914, a line of trenches stretched from the Swiss border to the English Channel. One soldier wrote, "We didn't build a fortress. We clawed at the earth like animals." Generals still thought it was temporary. They believed winter would end the war. Instead, winter brought rot, rats, waterlogged boots, and the dawning realization that no one was going anywhere. So why couldn't either side break through? Because the weapons of World War I were built to kill, not to advance. Machine guns, like the German MG-08, could fire hundreds of rounds per minute. They made charging enemy lines suicidal. Artillery evolved rapidly. The French 75mm was fast, accurate, and terrifying. Shells obliterated trenches, trees, men. They shattered bodies and morale. Smokeless powder meant gunners could fire without giving away their position. No warning, just impact. Snipers picked off anything that moved above the parapet. Barbed wire tangled and slowed the brave. Gas attacks would come later, but the killing was already industrial. And yet, commanders still ordered frontal assaults, over and over. One British officer recalled, "We went over the top with bayonets and found death waiting in lines. Even if soldiers wanted to adapt, they couldn't." Wireless radios were primitive. Messages traveled by runners, pigeons, or wire, often too slow, too late, or lost to artillery. Attacks were poorly coordinated. Infantry would advance, but artillery wouldn't adjust in time. Barrages fell short, or worse, hit their own men. Airplanes were still in their infancy. Spotting enemy positions was guesswork. Commanders often had no idea what was happening at the front. Troops were dying before news even reached headquarters. The fog of war wasn't just metaphorical. It was real, thick, and deadly. By 1914, France had mobilized 2.9 million soldiers. Germany, 2.3 million. These weren't nimble forces. They were gigantic beasts, hard to feed, harder to direct. Railroads helped move troops quickly, but only along fixed lines. Defenders could shift reinforcements fast. Attackers, however, had to march. Advancing meant dragging artillery across destroyed roads. Horses collapsed. Men carried supplies on their backs. And when the assault failed, they had to retreat the same way. The cost of every offensive grew steeper. The reward? A few meters, maybe. By late 1914, even those who wanted to keep fighting couldn't. Germany was overstretched. Its troops were exhausted. Artillery couldn't keep pace with infantry. France suffered staggering losses. Thousands of officers were dead. Morale plummeted. Worst of all, there weren't enough shells. Ammunition had been stockpiled for a quick war, not a prolonged siege. Commanders had to ration shells. Entire sectors went quiet because there simply wasn't enough firepower to attack. With no other option, soldiers kept digging and praying the next shell didn't have their name on it. What began as shallow foxholes turned into a grotesque underground world. Frontline trenches, support trenches, communication trenches, dugouts, listening posts, sniper nests, machine gun bunkers. A British officer described it as a city without light, without laughter, without time. Rain turned trenches into swamps. Snow froze men in place. Rats fed on corpses. Trench foot rotted flesh. Gas attacks turned lungs to liquid. Soldiers lived like moles, emerging only to kill or be killed. And still, they hoped for movement, for a breakthrough, for something to end the nightmare. It wouldn't come for 3 more years. Trench warfare wasn't part of the plan. It was the result of plans that failed, weapons that killed too well, and leaders who hadn't caught up with the future. Men dug not to win, but to survive. And in doing so, they created a world more terrifying than any strategist could imagine. A world where courage meant crawling through mud, where glory meant lasting one more day, and where movement, the very thing everyone had planned for, was the first casualty of the Great War. If you thought this was brutal, wait until you see what trench life looked like from the inside. In our next episode, we'll go inside the trench systems, the routines, the horrors, the daily madness. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and never forget, history isn't just dates. It's the dirt, the blood, and the silence in between.